If you're in enough Christian circles or pastoral circles, you perhaps have heard debates and arguments, healthy ones maybe not the ones that are off-putting or pull anyone down, but conversations, let's say, and discussions around this idea of church. What does it mean? Today, I want to do, instead of your traditional devotional, I want to do a little bit more of a history lesson. And before you turn away and click that button off, I think you're going to find this very, very interesting. I want us to go through the history of what we call church. And I want to use two phrases that come up a lot, and they begin to become a cliche in some ways. But the first one is the church is not the building, but it's the people. I think we could all learn that, and I think we can all agree that just a building in itself, whether that building burnt down for whatever reason, got hit by a tornado, God forbid, we'd still be the church, right? So that's one. But the second one is the one I want to focus on today, and it's this phrase that comes up a lot when we talk about people maybe who have left church or even left the faith altogether, and they say things like, I just don't want to go to church anymore, I want to be the church. So the idea there is that you individually would be going out and serving and being the church, as we say. But the question still remains, what does this word church actually mean? So I want to take us through the concepts in Scripture that we see and what we would associate with the church and its function and the reason behind what they are. But hold on with me here, because it's all coming to an interesting conclusion, I feel like. So the first Old Testament word that we find in Hebrew is the word synagogue. And that word is a word that we translate into synagogue. So the ancient Jews and even the current modern Jews would meet in the synagogue. Back then, what would happen is they would gather together, and they might start by singing some psalms together or hymns, but also they would go into debate of Scripture and reading Scripture out loud. For them, the debate and the trying to navigate their theology together as a community was very, very important, so that they bounced ideas off of them. Sometimes in more of like a brother-sister sort of way, they might get into some arguments together, but at the very end, they were unified by the Word, and they went to come back that next week or whenever they came back. It would be a little off-putting for us, wouldn't it, today, if we experience things like that. But in their culture, that was a very important part of their theology, that they had to wrestle with it, and they had to pick it apart and bounce it off of each other and disagree in some ways until they came to the conclusion. So synagogue or synago is the gathering of those people. So we move on to the New Testament, and there's this word that we keep translating as church, and it's the word ecclesia or ecclesia. I don't know how to pronounce it. But that particular word is talking about the gathered assembly of people. So they would come together, and a lot of the times what would happen is what we see around Christ's time, especially the early church, that this church would grow not because they'd be out there putting a big billboard on the side of the highway, but they would actually be seeing people that were in need, people who maybe were widowed, orphans, and they would bring them in and say, hey, we'll take care of you. But they would also meet to be able to strategize about how to help more and more people and how to get the word of Christ out to more and more people. So the word church that we use in English actually comes from, it's possible it could come from two different locations. One is kirke, or the other one is kirke, and I'm butchering the pronunciations, but just hear me out of why I'm going in this direction. That kirka actually is the gathered round, is what it means. So picture kirka, and you have people gathered in a circle. So we actually use this same word, the same root word, to get the word circus. Have you ever think that your church is a circus? Well, that's actually where the word comes from. So this idea of gathering in the round is where the word church comes from. Part of this also could come from another word, kirke, which I believe is Greek. I believe so. Well, anyway, but it actually talks about this gathering of people together for a specific purpose. So the word purpose is interesting there. In the early church, this kirka, or this ecclesia, or this body, would look around them and realize that the Romans were, for instance, the Romans were taking over everything. They were running the government. They were doing things that were not honoring to God whatsoever. So these groups would meet together, and the ancient early Christian Jews at the time would talk about different ways that they could be a social and political influence, so that God would be recognized and honored in their culture. So this is actually why we see from the very beginning why now, unfortunately, you do see some people who call themselves Christians kind of not doing the right things and trying to take over and trying to be in power and negative authority and things like that. So we have that. And in early times, and up until even as the word spread, as God influenced the whole world, and we come to America, for instance, we see till about World War II that the church was the centerpiece of all social activity, the influence of local society, the provider of education. We had orphanages, we had hospitals, all of the assisted living facilities, all these places. And I could make a huge list of what originated from the church as an enterprise of the church to get the word out and to help people and to serve the community. Now what we see in the early 1900s was that all of these things started to be delegated to the secular government. So it's an interesting history, isn't it? So when we say something like, don't go to church, be the church, well, yes. However, when we see the history of what the church is, it is not only the gathered people, but it's the sent people. So it's easy for me to say, like, well, I'm just going to listen to Jesus. I'm just going to do what he says individually and go out and do my own thing as I read the word. But that's actually taking, not only is that kind of scary because it's kind of becoming an echo chamber, but also it's kind of scary because we need each other. We need the gathering. We need the gathering. We need the reanimation of our souls and our bodies, and we need to go out there and do what God has called us to do. We need to take back dominion from the enemy. We need to start, I believe, becoming the centerpiece of society once again. And it's the church, the influenced people of God, that are supposed to be leading the cultural change around us, not by force, not by fist, but by the love of God and the grace of God. So it gives us a little important idea and a little glimpse of who we're supposed to be, just learning a little bit of history, right? Well, I hope you have a great rest of the week. See you Sunday.